I'm TJ, and I'm a clown that draws. The year was 2020, and I'd finally been invited to partake in my first ever D&D campaign. They'd already done a session or two and were looking for another player. I'd never participated in any kind of tabletop RPG before, and I didn't really know much about D&D or how it worked. But the DM went through the basics with me before sending me off to create my first ever character. As I was looking at my options for classes, reading all about the different skills and spells, something caught my eye. Power Word Kill. A 9th level enchantment that can compel a creature you see within range to die instantly. I thought this was the funniest thing ever. The thought of turning to the random bad guy of the week and saying, "You suck," and them instantly dropping dead was extremely compelling to me. Yeah, it was a 9th level spell, and the character I was creating was going to be started at level 3, but at that point I had hard committed. I wanted my guy to eventually get that spell and use it. That was my whole entire goal. So I was focusing on deciding between the casting classes. The party already had a wizard, a grouchy old guy with a dubious moral compass, and a thirst for power. And in my head, sorcerers and warlocks were just wizards wearing different hats. Again, I was very new to this, so forgive my past ignorance. So, the obvious choice became playing a bard. Now, even though I wasn't super familiar with D&D and its rules, I'd learned about the stereotypes surrounding bards through osmosis. Charming, full of themselves, and unabashedly horny. I didn't really want to play too much into that, in part because it was my first time role-playing and I wasn't super comfortable with it, but also because I didn't really think that sort of character would bring a whole lot to the table. So, I created this first iteration of Zephyrus, a starry-eyed 20-something whose main goal was to blow up and act like he don't know nobody, nyah, 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 nyah. With a tragic backstory, of course. I'll touch on that a bit more later. He was an air genasi bard who exclusively played air-based instruments, and I tried my best to have as many air-based spells in his repertoire. I designed him to have a swashbuckler look with some vague inspiration from traditional Portuguese clothing. The campaign was going well, I was having fun, and we were slowly uncovering sort of an elemental conspiracy. But, as is a common occurrence, our schedules stopped aligning, sessions kept being postponed, and eventually the campaign fizzled out. I really liked Zeph as a character. I thought his backstory had potential, and I wanted to integrate some of the cool world-building ideas our DM had presented throughout the campaign into his story. I kept drawing him, and over the years, he began to change. I developed his backstory more, and I wanted his design to reflect that. Maybe in another life, he could have been this happy-go-lucky, go-with-the-flow kind of guy, but it didn't really fit with the drama I crave. I started drawing him older, more jaded, angrier. A flawed character as a starting point to then learn and develop as the story progresses. And as that version of him was cemented in my mind, I wanted to put my vision onto paper and get a proper character sheet to reference later on. So, let me tell you a little bit about the new Zephyrus. Raised on a farm in the outskirts of a small village by a single mom, Aoife, he was the product of a one-night stand. Though, that didn't affect his upbringing much, as his mother was over the moon to find she was expecting. Aoife was an elf, estranged from her family for over a century. She'd moved far away from them to a much more rural area, looking to get away from their customs, arrogance, and bureaucracy. She wanted to contribute to a more honest and straightforward community. She'd always wanted to start a family, but hadn't really encountered anyone she'd want to raise a child with. Her unexpected predicament was counted as a blessing, and she quickly worked on expanding her little cabin to accommodate her upcoming bundle of joy. Zephyrus had a very busy, but sunny, childhood. His mother had quite a knack for teaching, so he was educated in a variety of things, from hands-on farming and animal tending to music, poetry, and history. He loved to run around and explore, and although he knew how to be polite and attentive to their neighbors when he had to, he was also known for being quite rowdy, never quite sitting still, and orchestrating elaborate pranks. His mother nicknamed him her little Zephyr, since he could be as wild and unpredictable as the winds. And, as he grew tired of wearing dresses and being called the farmer's girl, that nickname evolved into Zephyrus, which both him and his mother felt was a more appropriate name for a young man. But, unbeknownst to both of them, this new name was more fitting than either of them anticipated. Unfortunately, Zephyrus's birth was not by chance, and he wasn't truly the half-elf he appeared to be. For 17 years, he hadn't really thought that much about his father. Yes, he'd been curious when he saw other children with a set of parents, but his mother had been honest when he'd started asking questions. She'd known his father very briefly. He was a traveler or an adventurer of some kind. They'd met in the village's tavern, spent the night together, and he was gone the next day. He seemed nice, but by the time she knew she was expecting, she had no way of finding him. But those adventuring types aren't usually the sort to settle down somewhere, much less for a minimum of 18 years. On the night of his 18th birthday, as he was settling into bed after a full day of celebration, his shiny new magical artifact hung around his neck. A storm began brewing. Slow at first, but quickly getting out of hand. Building and building, wind so strong the windows started rattling, the vague sound of thunder approaching, and before he could even get up and look outside, in the blink of an eye, the house's roof came off, and he was dragged into the gales above. He remembers it in pieces. Wood from the walls, shingles from the roof, shattered glass panes, whirling around him, cutting into him, as he desperately lifted his arms in an attempt to shield his face. He could barely look around. And before he could even begin to parse what was happening, the storm had hit the small barn next to their house. The bigger and heavier objects were slow to rise, with something light and narrow, like a pitchfork, was easily dragged into the eye of the storm, catching him in its trajectory and subsequently impaling him out of the storm. As he hit the ground, vaguely aware of the squelching sound of muscles tearing and bones breaking, the storm dissipated instantly. When he came to next, he found that opening his eyes made no difference, as all he was met with was inky darkness. He wasn't lying on grass anymore, as the floor beneath him was hard and dry. As the memories hit him, he instinctively reached for his stomach, but there was nothing there. In fact, his shirt was neither pierced nor soaked through with blood, as he had been expecting. He took a deep breath and realized there was no pain at all. His next realization sent a chill down his spine. He couldn't hear anything beyond the blood thrumming in his ears. No wind, no trees, no birds, and no people. He tried getting up, only to immediately slam his head into another hard surface. On his back once more, he reached out above him, only to be met with the distinct texture of wood grain on his fingers. Pushing it with both hands, he notices that it has some give, though it's clearly being weighed down by something. Something else catches his attention, and he shifts the wood above him once more, hearing something like sand falling. Wait, no. It smells like dirt. Oh god. Heart quickening, he reaches to his sides. Wooden panels surround him, perfectly sized and constructed to fit him within him. A coffin. Trying to quell the horror swelling within him, he knows he has to do something fast. He has two options: lay there until he runs out of air, or try to dig himself out and risk suffocating in soil. He's always seen himself as the proactive kind, and if he's going to die here, he might as well have a hand in it. So he holds his breath, fights with all his strength to slide the lid above him to the side, and as soon as the dirt starts pouring in, he digs. And digs. Have you ever tried to dig a hole with your bare hands? As you can imagine, they don't make for the best shovels. It's a long and tedious process. And Most people can't really hold their breath for longer than 90 seconds. But as Zephyrus is desperately clawing at the soil around him, he finds that he doesn't really feel that building pressure in his chest, and that his lungs don't long for him to take a breath. He continues to hold, and he digs. He finally breaks through, dirt now deeply ingrained under his nails. He drags himself out of his would-be tomb, and he's greeted to soft moonlight and an eerie quiet. He allows himself to lay there for a minute, a brief respite. As he stands, he wishes he hadn't. He sees his grave, its marker knocked over during his escape, but that isn't what makes him pause. There's a second grave, and a third, and a fourth, dozens, neatly laid out one after another. His heart seizes, and he feels his vision swimming. No. He doesn't let himself process any of it, and instead assesses his surroundings. He's at the farm. Or, well, what's left of it. He recognizes among the wreckage pieces of their furniture and walls him and his that they had painted together. He turns north and runs towards the village. Surely they'll have answers for him, and they'll all laugh at the misunderstanding. His mother's face will light up when she sees him alive and well, and then she'll turn towards whoever misdiagnosed him as dead and make their life hell for a while. And then they'll all mourn together and rebuild. His hope shatters as soon as he arrives, and it curses his elven ancestry for giving him such clear vision under the moon's light. He'd rather live in ignorance for another couple of hours, but he's forced to face the truth instead. The entire village looks as if it had been leveled to the ground. No sign of movement, and not a lit torch or campfire in sight. He considers calling for help, for his mother, running around and shouting until his voice turns hoarse. But the fight leaves him. His limbs turn heavy. He collapses to the ground and weeps. In the morning, he clutches the necklace around his neck and gathers himself as best as he can. Then, he picks a direction and walks. Later in the day, he finds a slow stream and takes the opportunity to wash the dirt off. His hands and arms are caked in it, but as the grime washes off, he finds that he isn't met with the usual pale and sunburn-prone complexion. His skin is this sickly, grayish blue. Startled, he leans over the water and just stares. Reflected was a stranger, stark white hair and that same otherworldly blue coloring his face, which was now littered with healed-over scars. He splashes water into his face, then takes hold of his right arm and bites down on the flesh as hard as he can. Pulling back, he's relieved to find that the broken skin is bleeding. Okay, good. He still bleeds. That's something. He finishes washing up, and he keeps walking. He tells himself that he's trying to find the nearest settlement, another village, but he's never been particularly good with directions, and maps were never particularly captivating. But he keeps going. He hunts and scavenges. He makes makeshift shelters and tries to sleep through the night. And he does his best to ignore the constant thrumming sensation he can feel beneath his skin. A week passes before he finally spots smoke. He comes across a small camp of soldiers, and, coincidentally, a couple of them sport the same complexion as him. They instinctively raise their weapons, but one look at the scrawny, wide-eyed kid has them lowering them, a weird glint in their eyes. One of the soldiers, with odd grey skin which held a distinctively metal finish, pipes up. "Are you new, recruit? You got lost or something?" "Recruit?" Zephyrus lets out, throat dry from not speaking for a full week, and after a beat he asks, "What are you people?" The soldiers laugh, before the same one speaks again. "Gods, real fresh meat, huh? Don't even have the basics down. Sit down, kid, I'll lay it out for you. And he sits. And he explains what they are, and by extension, what he is. They're Genasi, half Jinn, half whatever else. Human, elf, dwarf, whatever. The Jinn part is what's relevant. Some Jinn have been taking unauthorized leaves onto this plane, the material plane, and leaving behind offspring. He doesn't much want to get into the politics of it, but the elemental planes have been trying to forge a positive relationship with this plane, and having some of their own leaving behind little explosives doesn't really make for good business. Explosives? Zeph questions. Well, you see, the Jinn have a hierarchy. Kinda like nobility, kinda like the army. The higher up the Jinn, the more powerful. The more powerful the Jinn, the more unstable the child. Have you ever heard of a changeling? Nasty buggers. Make themselves look like a regular elf, human, dwarf, whatever. Sire children without revealing their true nature. Kid grows up looking like their normal parent, then bam. Soon as they come of age, they become their true selves. A changeling. It's a bit like that for us, but the more powerful the parent, the more delayed the transformation is. And the bigger the fallout. For me, it happened when I was like 5 or 6. Had the whole house shaking. Granny corralled me into standing under a doorway. You know, standard earthquake protocol. But as my skin started to change and harden right in front of her, she turned tail and ran as far as she could. From me. Can't say I blame her. There's something like that for you too, right? But I gather yours was a storm instead. Zephyrus could only nod, eyes wide. So, obviously, you can understand how dangerous that is. Well, the higher-ups decided to intervene, and that's where we come in. We search for those kids. Most of them have been shunned by the people they called family. And we bring them with us. Sort of like restitution. Free food and board. We teach them how to control their new powers, so they aren't a danger to themselves or others. Most of them stay, as you can see by yours truly. I'd like to extend that same offer to you. And Zephyrus, desperate to know more, accepts. He's treated well at the start. They show him the ways of the sword, he dips his toes into trying out magic, and he learns more about Jinn and Genasi. When they ask him if he'd like to join their ranks properly, that same metal-skinned soldier offering him a warm smile, he does so willingly. He trains, becomes a proper soldier, tries to desperately ignore the voice in his head telling him that something is wrong. But he has nothing else, and if he's being honest, the way some of the younger soldiers and even some of his officers regard him is intoxicating. They show him this level of respect he doesn't feel he's earned, especially since he's yet to be sent out in the field. But there's something there, he knows. Hell, the sword he's given looks too good to be wielded by your run-of-the-mill cannon fodder, so they must see some potential for greatness within him. But he's too perceptive for his own good. Even without trying, the pieces of a very fucked up puzzle begin assembling themselves before him. Kids kept being brought in at an alarming rate for what he'd been told were only a couple of unauthorized rendezvous, and obviously every single soldier he's trained with was a Genasi. He's aware that this isn't a bureaucratic peacekeeping organization. They're building themselves an army. He ignores it, even if it makes his stomach churn, until it is so blatantly slammed in his face that he has to confront it. He was wrapping up his morning training, his sparring partner a couple of years his senior, and a bit taller. Some emotion he can't quite discern clouds the other Genasi's face as they trade sword blows. His opponent staggers for a brief moment, but it's enough for Zephyrus to disarm him and swiftly deliver a kick that brings him flat onto his back. He hovers his sword over the other man's chest, and he can't help but grin as he says, "I win." The other man growls, mouth opening, clearly preparing a less than kind response, but they're interrupted as the swordmaster approaches them, clapping Zephyrus on the back. "Very well done, boy, but I was thinking that's enough for now. He's too distracted to give you a proper fight. Go freshen up before your upcoming theoretical classes." Zephyrus nods, warmth blooming in his chest at the praise, and he runs off to do as he's told. As he's approaching his room, he hears heavy footsteps trailing behind him. Ah, the smell of a sore loser. As he turns, expecting excuses and demands for a rematch, he's taken by surprise as a heavy fist connects with his jaw, and he staggers back, failing to catch himself and falling flat on his ass. He's had his fair share of stares and whispers, but so far, no one had let their distaste of him get to this point. His absolute confusion must be written clear on his face, since the taller man scoffs and crosses his arms instead of taking another swing at him, and he speaks through gritted teeth. "I've been here for 10 years, been a proper soldier since I was 15, been on plenty of field missions, thought I'd paid my dues, that'd be some sort of promotion on the horizon for me. And then you come along, and they hand you everything. And you parade yourself around with this inflated ego as if you've earned it. I would feel sorry for you if it wasn't equally as infuriating. You think you've got something special." Zephyrus, still on the floor, shifts his eyes towards his room's door, pondering a swift escape, but said glance does not go unnoticed. The man above him sneers, before continuing on his tirade. "Of all things, they give you your own fucking room. We're packed like sardines in ours, and they keep more of us coming in every week. But no, the little princeling needs his privacy." Zephyrus can't help but interrupt, confused. "Princeling?" The other man raises his hands to the air, disbelief and frustration on his face. "No, please, you dumb fuck. You must have figured it out by now. Your father runs the place." His blood runs cold. And before the other man can say anything else, Zephyrus scrambles to his feet and darts into his room, locking the door behind him. He was lying. He has to be. None of this made sense. The guy, yeah, he was clearly jealous and just trying to mess with his head. He tries to push all the doubt and confusion he has to the side, and he works on getting ready for his next classes. He doesn't see that soldier again. Some of the glares he'd been receiving before seemed to double in both quantity and intensity. The younger soldiers he thought he was building a good repertoire with now cowered at his approach and tried to get out of conversations as soon as they could do so politely. He grits his teeth and squares his shoulders, and decides to play along for the time being, biding his time. Months pass, and he's finally rewarded for his patience. Or punished, depending on how you see it. It's during sword practice again, because of course it is. He always tries to pick a sparring partner whose eyes glint with a speck of anger, as those ones will actually put up a proper fight. And they always accept, looking to put him in his place. This time, it's a fire genasi woman, with well-defined muscles and a badly disguised sneer adorning her face. It's a couple of rounds in, when they're both glistening with sweat, that he hears their swordmaster's voice call them to attention. They both straighten, awaiting whatever announcement he's readied. "Soldiers, I am elated to inform you that our esteemed Commander Torin has decided to pay us a visit. He has taken it upon himself to assess your skills personally, and..." The swordmaster hesitates before continuing in a lower tone. "He might be considering taking one of you under his wing." The room's reaction baffles Zephyrus. Some soldiers groan, others scoff, and none of them seem particularly excited about this prospect. Some of them are glaring at him again. He tries to brush it off, but the swordmaster's undignified yelp catches his attention. Sir, I didn't expect you this early. Please, come in." And as the stranger enters the room, the final piece falls into place. At the door stands a tall man in plate armor. Short white hair, clean-shaven, and a strong pointed nose, alongside that horrid blue skin. There's no use in denying it to himself anymore. The resemblance is uncanny. The swordmaster keeps talking, but as Zephyrus locks eyes with his father, the armored man raises a hand to silence the ongoing blabbering, before making his way straight towards him. He eyes him, piercing, cold blue eyes looking him up and down, sizing him up. Zephyrus feels like a pinned butterfly. And the first words his father speaks to him are,
"It's a shame you have your mother's eyes."
Every emotion he's been suppressing over the past year slams into his chest all at once. The grief, the rage, the loneliness, the desperation. He can feel his blood singing under his skin, something building and begging to be let out. Sword still in hand, empowered by this whirlwind inside him, he swings it at the man who ruined his life. Torin swiftly catches and redirects the blade's tip upwards. And as he does so, they both watch, almost in slow motion, as trendles of electricity travel from Zephyrus's hands to the end of the sword, coalescing in what felt like minutes, but happens in less than a second, and sending a surge of lightning to blast a hole into the ceiling above. The tingling under his skin subsides. Zephyrus lets go of the sword, and before it even hits the floor, his father backhands him across the face.
"Let that be your first lesson, boy. A year in the barracks will never supersede centuries of instinct honed on the battlefield."
He turns to address the sword master.
"That'll be all. You may resume your training."
Before promptly leaving, without even sparing a mere glance back at his son. Zephyrus tries to keep training, but his opponent's angry glare has morphed into one of pity. Humiliated, angry, confused, and frankly a bit scared, he excuses himself and returns to his room. He has the whole picture now. Jin go into the material plane, sire children of varying power, who then get recruited and indoctrinated into this army. Obviously, the whole peacekeeping thing was bullshit, so they're planning an outright war between the planes. But they have the numbers. There seems to be new people coming in pretty regularly. Why hadn't they started yet? Were they waiting on something? He thinks back to the tingling under his skin, the lightning, the hole in the ceiling. He'd been around other air genasi, taken classes together to hone their instinctual magic, taken turns zapping each other in his earlier days before the young ones were too scared of him. He'd never done that before. Never seen any of the other ones do that either. He wasn't a soldier. He was their weapon, their trump card. This is too big of a thing for him to tackle alone. Surprisingly, they let him leave. Properly leave, back to the material plane with the expectation that he'd come crawling back eventually, and if he didn't, they could always send someone out to find him, like they did that first time. 20 years pass. A short time for a Jin, but enough time for Zephyrus to hone his skills, make connections, and, most important of all, conspire. He's still got a long way to go. He tried being honest at the start, but nobody bought a word of what he was saying about an upcoming interplanar war built on making and raising your own army. It's too messy, too complex. But saying, "My dad killed my mom and I'm hunting him down to avenge her," is an easier story for people to swallow. So, that's the Zephyrus you see now. He's 39 and not doing too good. He wears the necklace his mother got him at all times, which has some interesting abilities that I want to play with in the future, and he continues to carry and use the sword he'd been given when he'd enlisted. He thinks it'll be poetic if that's the sword his father dies on. For his outfit, I still wanted to keep that swashbuckler vibe, but not have it be as loud and bright as his previous design. He wears his hair long and keeps a well-groomed mustache since, you guessed it, he loathes the thought of looking anything like his father. I really liked the sash he was wearing in his older design, and I think it just adds a fun little flair to his outfit. And also, it's exactly where he got impaled, so it being red alludes to that incident as well. He's a man who has the potential to be charming, and he does employ it whenever it helps him further his plans. But holding on to that anger and resentment for 2 decades has left him a bit jaded. And that's where my other 2 D&D characters turned into regular OCs come into play. It's still very much a teaming up and going on adventures kind of story, but with Zeph having this ultimate goal in mind which drives his actions. And with the help of the other 2, he'll start unpacking all that baggage that's been piling up over the years. I'm quite happy with this character sheet, and as I was drawing it, I felt myself become more and more familiarized with his face, and it was starting to look closer to what I had in my head for him. I'm glad to finally put it on paper, and it'll serve as a really good reference for whenever I want to draw him in the future. I've been thinking of doing little animatics, pretty rough ones, just to further explore ideas I had for his story. Also, this video and this project as a whole took quite a bit longer than I was expecting. To be honest, I got a bit too ambitious, which I think you can see at the start when I was fully set on rendering his face, and I did one portrait and I was like, nope, I'm not gonna do that. But I hope the wait was worth it. I'm looking to tackle a simpler project or video idea next, but I am keeping those other two D&D redesigns in line after my brain recovers from this one. I hope you liked this video, and I am excited to share more about Zephyrus and the rest of my D&D DLCs. And as always, remember to stay silly.